Welcome, everybody. I'm so glad that you're all here. Um, for those of you that are not yet part of the Pregnant Together community, I'll just do like a brief little intro and then I'll let Rebecca take it away. So if you don't know me yet, I'm Maria Goodman. I use they, them pronouns. I'm a queer midwife, and I started this really awesome online community for queer folks and solo parents, from preconception through parenting. And every month we have visiting experts do talks on lots of different things, from growing our families to preparing to give birth to healing from birth trauma. And I'm really excited to have Rebecca here this month to help people understand how to hopefully prevent and then also heal from birth trauma if it does happen, specifically for queer folks. This is being recorded. It will be shared in the Pregnant Together community. And yeah, I think that's all. Just because it's a really intimate topic, I'm going to put our group agreements in the chat. These are agreements that we have kind of crowdsourced over the course of the last year or so, and what we use for our Zoom meetings. So basically, be kind, be conscious of how you take up space. There's going to be some, and Rebecca will explain more, some interaction later on, but that won't happen until the end. Okay, I will stop talking and pass it over to you, Rebecca.
Oh, wonderful. Thank you, Maria. And it's such a delight to be here with you all. I'm going to go ahead and just share my screen. We were discovering that it's kind of showing all my tabs up there for you, but hopefully you're able to follow along okay. And I'm just going to minimize this. Okay. All right. So this is really a treat to be here and talk to you about preventing birth trauma and healing from birth trauma. This time together really bridges two worlds that are very dear to my heart, the birth world and the world of healing. So my name is Rebecca Shepherd. I use she, her pronouns, and I'm a licensed marriage and family therapist in California, which is a bit of a misnomer because I don't see couples or families. My practice is comprised of adult individuals. I'm in Sacramento, and so I see folks here or online anywhere in California. I'm a queer somatic therapist. Somatic meaning that we track and uncover what the body is holding in relation to distressing life experiences. And I think it's worth mentioning here that, the world of Western psychology really for a long time has centered, at least when it comes to therapy, around the notion that you go and you talk to someone and you have sort of intellectual insights about yourself, your patterns, your problems, more from a cognitive lens. And what we've now come to understand is that our lived experience is not really encoded in our cognitions. It's really encoded in our bodies and the nervous system that runs throughout the body. And so in order to feel better, we really have to be able to meet traumatic life experiences from that place. And so before becoming a therapist, I was also a birth doula. I had a practice in Seattle for 8 years. And so I attended lots of births and supported lots of families across the threshold of becoming parents. And I am also a parent myself to two sweeties there on the left, my son and my daughter, Malachi and Opal. And that's a picture of me on the right. And I wanted to bring these pictures here just to invite the spirit of connection to the path that you all are navigating now, the path to building families, which may or may not yet include children. And the webinar today is going to include didactic info and somatic practices that we'll get to do together. And I'll give you more of a sense of what to expect in a moment. But I thought it could be nice to start by just taking a few moments together to turn inward towards creating a sense of real presence on this path right now. in this moment and helping us just ground in our bodies. So everything I invite you to do here is 100% optional, so please just take care of yourself in any ways that you need to while we're together. If you choose to participate, the invitation is to close your eyes now or simply find a point of focus somewhere in the room and just begin to turn your awareness, your attention inward. And just see if you can feel your heart beating in this moment. This takes some stillness. And now just tuning into the breath, just watching your breath. Rolling in, rolling out. Just like ocean waves. And just gently scanning through your body, see if you can locate some place inside that feels at ease. Some part of you that feels like it can access peace in this moment. Maybe that's in your buttocks or your legs. Maybe that's in your belly or your throat or your fingertips. And if this feels hard in this moment, you can just check in with the distal points of your body. Maybe the hair follicles on your head feel like they could relax, and maybe that's a point of entry into a place that just feels easeful in this moment. And now just invite in an image of yourself as a child. And just go with the image that comes. And just place them in this easeful place you found inside your own body in this moment. And just notice what it's like for them to be invited, to be brought here to this place. What it feels like to be there. And we're just accompanying the child in the experience. So if it's uncomfortable, just accompanying them in that. Now, whatever this experience has been for you, whatever it was, you can just let it be so, and you can let it go now. And slowly begin to bring yourself back. And hopefully that supported you in just arriving, just getting here in a good way. And I'd love to transition now into giving you a sense of what to expect for our time together. So we're going to talk about trauma. We're going to talk about how it's defined and how it's experienced inside our bodies and in our brains. And we're going to talk specifically about birth trauma, both giving birth and witnessing birth. We'll talk about risk factors that might enhance the likelihood of leaving a distressing event feeling traumatized. We'll talk about symptoms you might experience and what to do, how to cope, how to prevent yourself from walking away from a distressing experience feeling traumatized, if possible. And we'll explore some somatic tools for healing. So, what is trauma? Well, the dictionary would define it as a stressful or dangerous event that can cause lasting negative effects on a person's physical, mental, social, or spiritual well-being. It's difficult to cope with and out of your control. And I'm really curious, I want to expand this to look at you guys again, but if you're open to raising your hand with the group, it's of course optional, but if you have, or even raising your Zoom hand, if you've ever experienced a stressful event that had lasting negative effects on your physical, mental, social, or spiritual well-being. Yeah. Okay. And have you ever had an experience that felt difficult to cope with or out of your control? Yeah. Yeah. So we are built for this as humans. We have evolved to withstand distressing life events. And ideally, when navigating a stressful life event, something scary, something overwhelming, we hope to move through it and be able to come back to homeostasis. But sometimes an event is way too overwhelming or totally unexpected or downright terrifying or terrorizing, and we do not have the capacity to return quickly to easefulness. And so what we're really navigating here is how to be able to return to overall functioning if something has hung on and stayed with us. So let's talk a little bit about this. So the nervous system has 3 autonomic responses to threat that follow sort of like an evolutionary hierarchy. And as Homo sapiens sapiens, we rely most on this newest evolutionary response to help us return to a state of safety when we've experienced a threat. So, but when these newer responses fail, we regress to using these older evolutionary responses. So this first system, the social engagement system, this is the pathway that is unique to mammals. And this is where we will try to negotiate or mitigate threat by using the face, facial expression, vocalization, the tone of voice or the volume of the voice, or language, the choice of words, really trying to get out of threat by engaging socially. Now, if this system does not negate the threat, this is when the sympathetic nervous system will gear up for fight or flight. So this is the systems inside your body that really mobilize to take action. This is like your heart starts pounding, you start breathing quickly, you try to do something to escape the situation or ward off the situation in a more active way. So this is typically when we feel triggered, when we feel activated, we're in that place. More obviously than when we're in that social engagement space. And then if that fight or flight does not work and the threat persists, then the nervous system will resort to its oldest response, which is the parasympathetic immobilization responses. So passing out, going limp, going into unfeeling or dissociated states. And honestly, I want to speak for a moment here to what I see with partners, non-gestational parents, the moving into immobilization, because if something is happening in the birth space that is so unexpected, things are going in a totally other direction than you had planned for, this can, you can't really fight your way out of that situation. You can't leave the room. So we will talk about the specific impact of trauma on non-gestational parents as well. But I really also, before we move on, just like want to highlight the needs that we have for social engagement, not just for mitigating threat, but in recovering from stressful life experiences. And so just really, even now, thinking about the role that community plays in your life right now as you prepare or as you've come through that threshold and become a parent. Who is around you? Who's got your back? Who can you turn to? Who can listen and understand and really be there for you? Human connection when we're suffering is healing. And so I'm going to move now into just an image that's helpful, just to give you kind of a picture of how extensive the nervous system is. It really runs throughout our whole body. So you'll see on the top left there, the central nervous system is comprised of the brain and the spinal cord, and then the peripheral nervous system are all those lines running off it. And I don't want to get too scientific here, about it all, but just taking a look at the sympathetic nerves on the right side. This is all that stuff that gears up. What I really hope for you to see is that every system in the body is impacted when we're triggered. The pupils dilate, the saliva slows down, you're breathing faster, the heart rate's going, your bladder can release, your digestion stops. So every part of us becomes impacted when we have a distressing event that we struggle to make sense of, struggle to cope with. This is a bit of a busy graphic, but I think it's very helpful to help us understand what is going on for us when something is happening that we feel totally out of control to stop. So let's just focus for a moment on this green zone, this window of tolerance. You see the picture of the sandy beach there. And I'll read this to you. It says, when we're in the window of tolerance, life feels comfortable. Our body's in an optimal state, and we can access both reason and emotion. We're calm but not tired. We're aware and alert but not anxious. We engage with our environment well. So in this state, in the window of tolerance, we're going to feel effects like you see there on the right: grounded, present, relaxed, flexible, open, regulated. This is like where we all long to be as we navigate life and the world. But as we all know, we go through the world and we have challenging experiences that dysregulate us. And really, we go one of two directions. We go up or down, depending on the moment, depending on our temperament, depending on all kinds of factors, including the things we've already lived through in our lives. And so going up top, you see the image of that volcano exploding, the hyperarousal of the nervous system, fight or flight activation, intense anger. This can look like total overwhelm, feeling threatened, out of control, panic, chaos, rage, anxious, all of that active, mobilizing those forces of intense energy in the body. And then moving down below to dysregulated states that more look like freeze, where the system starts shutting down. The overwhelm is so intense, so painful, so hard to manage or make sense of or cope with, that we start moving into states of numbness, flatness, being kind of dissociated, not present, unavailable, detached. And that's, like I mentioned, that's our oldest system to protect us from feeling when things get really, really challenging. And so let's take this now into the birth environment. So in this presentation, you're going to hear me mostly reference like hospital birth settings, because those are the settings where you tend to be exposed to more variables that are out of your control, just in terms of like who's going to be there that day, who's coming out of the room and at what rate, and decisions that are made in the hospital setting involve more options than you'd have at a home or hospital birth. And so I'll be using that as an example, at least in this next bit. So we're going to talk about birth trauma, and there's such a wide spectrum of what goes on to be defined as trauma after a lived experience. So it's not objective. Two people can be standing in the same room, witnessing or experiencing the very same event, and one person goes forward to feel fine about it, and the other is like ruminating for months about that event and can't seem to let it go. And so it's so subjective and has to do with all those factors I mentioned that are deeply personal. But it's helpful to mention birthing is a mammalian experience that's an altered state experience. So our sense perceptions are altered when giving birth. So we may be more sensitive to sound or lights, or unaware of the people around us, or hyper aware of the people around us. And so for some people, just being intruded upon over and over by staff in the hospital setting can feel like a trauma, something they can't let go of later. A change in the birth plans. So let's say you put a lot of intention in the way you want things to go, and you've thought and planned with great care, and then in the moment things are not happening as you had expected. Physical trauma for the birth or a baby. So damage to the pelvic floor, perineal tear, baby in the NICU with meconium aspiration, or being born preterm. These are common experiences that people navigate and sometimes go on to be really challenging to integrate. And then just thinking about the trans or non-binary experience in the hospital setting, where there can be in a labor and delivery unit a strong emphasis on mother-baby or the womanly experience of becoming a parent or giving birth, and just the stress of being in that environment where you may not feel welcomed or seen or like a sense of belonging. And then those little microaggressions of just being misgendered, having your partner misgendered. These are very queer specific. Oh, I want to talk about just the emotional distress that can happen to partners. Again, just witnessing birth, because we tend to forget about non-gestational partners in terms of what we think when we think of birth trauma. And, you know, the partner is the one in the room who's really conscious and aware of everything that's happening, whereas the laboring person may be very altered and not quite with it. And so sometimes, I saw this a lot in my doula practice, we would come out of it and integrate afterwards, and it was the non-gestational partner that had carried the trauma of the events that had unfolded, that had surprised them or shocked them in some way. In these settings, you know, you can experience language that doesn't align with your body. You know, I'm not so sure about the paperwork these days. I stopped my doula work some years ago, and it was in a different city, or a different state. And so maybe paperwork here in California, or I don't know about wherever you're located, but you can see this on forms that say mom and dad, or assumptions from staff can be challenging. I'm going to talk about this in a moment, but the importance of choosing a birth environment that you feel really is going to support your queer family is going to be one of the most critical pieces you can do to prevent birth trauma, being with a care team that supports you. So assumptions from staff just meaning whoever's in the room making assumptions about who the parents are based on their gender. And then, believe it or not, in the hospital setting as a doula, I did see hostility on the part of the nurses that were there. You know, nurses are people and can have their own political or religious views and bring those into a birthing space and cause people harm and pain through their own attitudes. And then postpartum, so challenges with feeding or physical healing, all of these can be issues. And there are many others, but this just gives you a window into the kinds of trauma that people walk away from their birth experience having lived through and working to integrate. So we'll talk about risk factors that might enhance the likelihood of leaving a birth experience feeling traumatized, or leaving a distressing birth experience feeling traumatized. So having a history of physical or sexual assault or obstetrical violence, past medical trauma, either physical medical trauma or emotional. So if you've ever had a care provider that did not listen to you, that overrode your wishes, or did not seem to put your interests or your needs or your questions, you know, first, that can feel very edgy walking into a clinical setting after having had challenges in the medical industrial complex. Ancestral trauma. So, for example, Black folks have been historically experimented on in medical settings. And so just the ancestral lineage, the trauma of walking into a hospital setting can put people on edge and maybe not even know why. But it's there. It's in the nervous system. Gender violence, existing unresolved trauma. So if you have trauma that you've lived through that has not been resolved, it's still in there. It's needing healing, and it can come with you into a new traumatic experience that kind of compound or exacerbate things. And then untreated mental health challenges, just as simple as depression and anxiety, which are fairly commonplace, but if untreated, you can just be walking into an experience just less internally resourced. And so let's talk about preventing, like the things you can do upfront that can prevent you from walking away. feeling disenfranchised or shocked or whatever, traumatized. So care team you trust, I put it in bold. This is so important. Really having a relationship with a provider that you trust, that you've built a relationship, that you've made certain this person understands you and your wishes, they have your best interests in mind and at heart, and that the team surrounding that medical practice is going to be offering you a psychologically safe environment for your family. And so people who are honoring all the things I already spoke about in that setting, if at all possible, I can say, and I want to be very unbiased as I say this, but I know I am a little bit biased, so I'll own it, that out of hospital birth settings with midwives, if you're interested or you have the capacity to, tend to lean more towards, you have a less institutional feeling experience that's more personalized to you. But that's not possible or even wanted by many people, to be in an out of hospital setting. But you do want to be prepared for what you're walking into when you're walking into an institutional setting. Where, let's say you've built a relationship with your doctor or your midwife for the whole pregnancy, but they share call with 7 other providers, and your chances are actually quite low of having that person present at your birth, that kind of thing. Community support, having your people in your corner all through the process, your family, your friends, your chosen family, people bringing you and sending you lots of love and wishes throughout the journey, and on the other side with meal trains and so on. Just having people to talk to process with is so important, that social engagement system. Having a birth doula, I know I'm biased on that, or other birth companion, your sister, your parent, your friend. Having someone there in the room can make, that you both know, can make such a huge difference in terms of both partners just feeling like someone else is there and got your back to really hold you through whatever the journey is. And then I mentioned spiritual traditions because especially traditions that can support us in kind of working with or being with the unknown, the challenge of letting go and having to trust. I think that's one of the really hard parts about preparing for birth, is that we're so out of control and we have the illusion of control. I mean, this is maybe all of life, right? Making plans and focusing on what we want to happen. And then we, in the end, have to open up and completely surrender to not knowing what's going to happen. And how challenging that can be emotionally to navigate that kind of complexity. So let's talk about in the moment techniques. So if things are getting challenging, there is good news I want to share with you, which is that you can override an activated nervous system by consciously utilizing tools like we'll talk about here. So preventing nervous system activation from remaining in the body after a trauma has passed is the aim with these. And our bodies are designed to do this. So I'll give you an example. Let's say you've planned in great detail the whole ideal birth and the team you trust and the environment is safe, but it just does not, your body doesn't go into labor, and you have to have some medical interventions that you hadn't expected, induction, and the labor's taking days. And now the laboring person needs to sleep, and the pain is too much to sleep, and now you have an epidural, and kind of like things maybe you weren't planning on, and now the baby isn't descending and into the pelvis, and so they manually break the bag of waters, and after multiple exams the baby is not coming down, and the baby's getting tachycardic, which means their heartbeat is racing, which means that there's now an infection present and a surgical birth is recommended. That may be very triggering for someone who was going in just to have a baby, and all this other stuff is going on for days and days. And so again, you can't fight or flee your way out of that situation. You're needed there in the moment. So one of the first things I want to mention is shaking. So it's been studied and observed that mammals in the wild will vigorously shake after a threat has passed, in order to purge from their system and return to homeostasis, in order to remain alert, in order to remain present. So shaking is one of my go-tos in distress. So shaking the arms, the legs, the whole body, shaking the large muscle groups, even flexing and releasing muscles, but moving energy, getting energy to move. I want to mention power poses. These are a little cheesy, and please forgive the cheesy names on these, but they were actually the best images I found. So a 2010 study showed that after 2 minutes of holding power poses in a situation where people were activated, nervous, or frightened, the participants had increased testosterone and decreased cortisol levels, cortisol being the hormone of, stress, distress. And later studies actually were more inconclusive. I think it's important to mention that, but I will say I have done these myself, and it's true. When you're feeling frightened, you start to kind of close off, shut down. Just stretching out and making your body big to meet a moment that is making you feel small truly has a positive impact. Let me see. Yeah, stretching, moving energy with your body. So movement is huge. Again, the nervous system is throughout the body, and moving the body will help you and be your ally. Breath is our anchor we can always come home to. Sometimes when we are super activated, we need to do things that are going to cause us to downregulate, to slow down. And so, And so something like box breathing, this is very simple, and you could try it with me now if you like. Breathing in for 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. Pausing for 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. Breathing out 1, 2, 3, 4. And resting 2, 3, 4. This is a very common technique, super, super helpful for down regulating. Also, ocean breathing, just breathing with that constricted throat where you can actually hear the breath like you're trying to make the sound of the ocean. I don't know if you'll hear me if I do it, but hopefully you know what I'm talking about. You'll see people do this in yoga class, for example. You can also do, if you are kind of in a shutdown state where you're dissociating, you're not staying present, you're kind of numb and unfeeling, you're going to want techniques with the breath that are bringing you back into presence, kind of invoking energy. So there's, of course, lion's breath. I'm sure you've done this if you've taken a yoga class. This is where you're breathing in, and then on the breath out, you look at the nose and you flare the tongue. And this always makes me think of becoming kind of like a wild animal that's ready to meet an intense moment. So this is very activating for the nervous system, kind of bringing you back online, bringing it back into the present, as well as breath of fire, which is really, so blowing quickly out of the nose or mouth. You can also use visual imagery with the breath, imagining you're breathing in peace and you're blowing away fear, harm, negativity, whatever's brewing in you that's challenging to be with. I would love to invite you all to do this. I think most people's microphones are off. I just want to kind of help you feel in your body the difference between breathing out and actually vocally sighing, because there's a huge difference in terms of the parasympathetic nervous system or calming response that happens. So this is where I'm talking about you can really override an activated, system by sighing. So I'd like to just invite you to take a long, slow, deep breath and just sighing it out without the voice, just letting the breath go out. And now I want to invite you to involve your voice loud and clear like mine, breathing in and letting out a big sigh. So this is something we will naturally do after a stressful event. Let's say you went in and took an exam or a test and you come out the doors and people will just organically go, oh my God, whoa, shit, like it's over. That big vocal sigh that's invoking the calming response in the body. And what the calming response does is it overrides the activation and it signals to the body the threat is over. It's gone, it's done for now. And it brings us back to peace. Now, it may not be actually true that the threat is over and done now in the moment you're doing it, but it allows you to stay calm and centered to be with whatever's happening. And then just again, human connection, soothing touch together with your partner or your friend or whoever's with you. Holding words of affirmation and care. We've got this. I love you. It's okay. It's going to be all right. Eye contact. So, so impactful. Love and compassion. You get the drift. Okay. I want to say a word here about surrender. I know I mentioned that word. So, oops, is that right? Yeah. So, this is a triggering word for some people, especially if you've been in a situation where your agency, your power was somehow, you were overtaken in some way, there was some kind of abuse, you were forced to surrender to a situation that you did not want to. So I get that this word is very triggering sometimes and can bring up very vulnerable feelings. I want to mention this word because a big piece that can help prevent trauma is being realistic about the fact that preparing for birth is this really wild, complex mix of being in your power, knowing what you want, making decisions that are in alignment with what you care about, assembling a care team, all the things that come together that are in your power. And then on the day of, surrendering to not knowing what is going to happen, what the experience is going to be like. I can't think of anything more harder pill to swallow than that, right? Having to do both at the same time. But what I can tell you is the most common form of birth trauma that I saw in my practice as a doula over those 8 years was people who had prepared for a very specific kind of birth, but what they hadn't prepared for was this letting go and seeing what would come apart. Having the rug pulled out from under them, having the shock of an experience they hadn't accounted for. And so there is this trust in your body, your baby, and the process that will be your story that day. And so letting go of the illusion of control. These are just helpful, important pieces that I just invite you into kind of sitting with whatever it brings up for you, especially if that's discomfort or resistance, and finding a space to talk about that before you're there, or afterwards, if this was a hard part of the journey for you, the surrender piece. I want to talk now about symptoms, signs that you might find that things that you are walking around carrying this still in a way that's really impacting your functioning. So depression or anxiety, sleep changes like sleeping too much or too little, and that's a change. Dissociating, spacing out, can't focus. Now I want to mention these top 3 can also just be the postpartum haze, and so it's not always that these signs mean you've lived through a trauma, but they can't, those top ones in particular can be indicators that you might want to investigate further, but especially if partnered with your racing mind that cannot let it go, that is chewing and chewing. I'm talking weeks, months, like ruminating, having flashbacks that feel hard to be with, scary. The body is like activated and suddenly you're back there and you feel out of control. Losing energy or interest in life, or being there, or kind of just really disengaging. Again, that shutdown, that dorsal vagal response to trauma. Hypervigilance, being super hyper aware and obsessive, or avoidance, avoiding like the place where you gave birth, avoiding driving by that place, avoiding talking about it, avoiding thinking about it. Troubles bonding with your baby because you're so consumed with it's like the energy inside you is so focused on trying to process this trauma that it's very hard to stay present with what's happening, which is you're caring for a baby around the clock. Reactive outbursts, social withdrawal, so either like really immense feeling that just cannot be contained, or growing very small and withdrawn. And then sometimes for some people, this can, manifest more physically. So having physical pain that's just not usually there, showing up out of the blue or not related to the birth at all for the birthing person, headaches, digestive problems like no appetite or stomach aches, this kind of thing, or addictions coming back and intensifying. All right, so let's talk about if you've been traumatized and you're going, I'm in the aftermath. That was a really traumatic experience. What am I supposed to do now? So nervous system regulation tools, therapy. I know therapy is such a privilege and it is not accessible to everyone. You do not have to see a therapist in order to heal from trauma. But I'll mention there are many kinds of therapy that are centered around helping people process and move through trauma. So I mentioned a few here. There are many others: EMDR, memory reconsolidation, EFT, which means two different things: emotionally focused therapy, or EFT. This tapping people do. This is this emotional freedom technique. Trauma focused cognitive behavioral therapy, trauma-informed expressive arts, psychedelic-assisted psychotherapy. There are many, many modalities, but talking to someone who is there to help you heal and help you process trauma, who's an expert in that field, can be largely supportive. Family, friends, community care. Again, people coming through, people asking you, something you can do before giving birth. Ask your community, your circle, can you check in with me after this is over? Can you check in with both of us on the other side of this? Knowing what you know about yourselves. Are you going to be someone that's really vocal about it if you're struggling? Or are you going to be someone that's really internal and has a hard time asking for help? Something you can preemptively do is say, I know I'm going to have a hard time asking for help if I'm struggling. Can you check in with me regularly for months, maybe, for 3 months, every week, check in on how I'm doing. Self-care practices, having time for you. And I just put a few here. There are so many out there in the world: journaling, time outdoors, listening to music, moving your body, dancing, hobbies, whatever feeds you, nourishes you, keeps you present in your life, right? So much of trauma it's like robs us of our lived experience because it consumes every part of our being. And so being able to regulate means being able to bring yourself back to what's in front of you so you can actually live your life as you cope. And then sometimes we need medications. Sometimes it's too much and you have a baby postpartum and you're not coping well and nothing is helping and you need to be able to function. No shame in taking medications, in seeking support through medications. And then just some practices to help you stay present. This is a very common one, but the 5 senses exercise, this is really helpful. If you are off, you are not staying present, you're having a hard time, come right here to 5 things I can see: the lamp, the scissors, the little artwork, right? The desk, whatever it is. 4 things you can touch, 3 things you can hear, 2 things you smell, 1 thing you taste. This is really, really bring you into the present moment. I want to show you a self-soothing body posture that I love. So sometimes, you can, actually, I would love for you to try this, everyone, in the privacy of your own home or wherever you are, putting your arms around yourself and just feeling this hug. And then I invite you to take one of your hands and just hook it under your armpit and the other to wrap around like a hug, and just kind of notice the difference between those two. Notice the containment that's available here, this sense of really being contained and held. um, pressure can be helpful to just help when things are spinning out. Pressure with your body, pushing against a wall, like actually giving your body pressure, pushing with your legs, feeling the pressure of a weighted blanket. These all signal support to your body, signal soothing and comfort. And then mindfulness practices, anything that's like calming the mind, meditation, qigong, yoga, breath work, self-compassion stuff. And so let's see here. The last thing I want to end with, and then I want to open up to you, because it's possible that I may not have mentioned tools that you already know are helpful to you in your life, and you might want to share that with the group, or you might have questions for me. But these are just some urgent care resources. So if you find that you are struggling and none of these coping measures are helping, I've just put this here. You can screenshot it. These are support lines that are open 24/7. The 988 is the crisis or suicide prevention hotline. There's the National Maternal Mental Health Hotline. So this is specifically for postpartum. The Trans Lifeline. These are all 24/7. And then Postpartum Support International, you leave a message and you will receive a call back. But these are helpful in the moment resources that are there for you in lieu of other resources. And so I will leave it there and come back to you, Maria, and to the community if there are anyone who wants to share or connect around any of this. Thank you so much. Thank you for having me.
Thank you. Yeah, feel free to unmute and share any questions that you have, or put it in the chat if you feel more comfortable doing that. Seeing some hearts. Thank you, Rebecca, for sharing your expertise with us.
Thank you so much.
Hi, Rebecca. Thank you for sharing it, all that information. I was wondering if you could put the 5 senses slide either back up or just drop it
Yeah.
in the chat. I just wanted to like quickly write it down.
Yeah, I would
Thank
really
you.
love to do that for you.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
That is a really good exercise. I'm going to remember that one. I feel like so much of this stuff is relevant
To all life.
to all life.
To being
Yeah.
alive.
Yes.
Yeah, I agree.
Great. So someone shared, and I won't say your name for confidentiality for the recording. I really like thinking about steps ahead of time instead of after a trauma has occurred. So thank you for sharing that.
Yeah, I'm really glad to hear that this was helpful to you, Lau. To, yeah, feeling prepared, feeling as secure and safe as you can going in.
Okay, everybody. Well, if there are no remaining questions or comments, we can end a few minutes early. And thank you, Rebecca, again for coming. And this is going to be such a great resource for folks at all stages. So I'm excited to share it in the community. And if you haven't joined yet, we have some really sweet groups at all different stages, and chat rooms, and so people can connect with other queer folks and solo parents all over the country and the world. Ethan, did you want to share something? Or you just unmute? You just, so I can
I
see your
want to
beautiful
say
face.
congratulations to Ethan, and because you're there. Look at you. You're there right now.
Yeah, this could not be more timely. I had just taken a brief phone call with my therapist right before this, to just kind of ground and get ready for this. So thank you so much. Both of you, I really, really appreciate this. It could not have been better timing. Really.
Wow.
Oh, yay. Well, sending you so much love, Ethan, and hope to hear how it goes when you're on the other side. And
Many well wishes. Yeah.
yeah. Okay,
How do we
everybody.
find info on this, your IG? Info on.
I think on Pregnant Together. So I'm
Oh,
going to send a
okay.
follow-up email to everybody.
Yeah.
Yeah, with some
Okay.
resources. Yeah. Yeah.
Matisse and Tika, it was really sweet to see you here.
Yeah. Hi.
Thanks, everybody.